I've been working on developing my game's personality. What if the laws of reality started breaking down? With that in mind, I started making parts of the world where gravity doesn't work normally. One of the things I've been tangling with is making exploration and travel more interesting. So I started thinking about adding different regions in the world. However, I don't want to have a stereotypical fire world, water world, jungle world. It's okay to have those things, but I want to inject some flavor into the world without repeating the same frustrations other games give players. Traveling over the world, though, where towns are far apart, it can be hard to find them. In order to make it more obvious where distant points of interest are, I've added in giant translucent domes over towns. This makes all of the towns identifiable from a distance, so the player isn't wandering around lost and confused. This is completely visual, not affecting gameplay at all. The implementation of this isn't too complicated. I have an array of spheres that are generated at the same time as the rest of the world. We pass in the same seed as the rest of the chunk system, so synchronization across multiplayer is free. These are only mesh instances, so they are pretty cheap, and rendering from a distance is not a problem. I may change this to a multi-mesh and play around with removing the non-visible parts of the sphere, but those would be performance improvements that are not limiting frame rate at the moment. Another thing to make the world a bit more interesting is adding in more art assets. So I added a pair of rock assets. This should help break up the repetitive terrain a little bit. I've also added a dialogue when a player interacts with an NPC. This makes it clearer what the player is doing and enables more interaction options in the future. The biggest addition is the gravity anomalies. The gravity anomalies are sections of the map with floating rocks and a miniature moon overhead. Entering these areas will decrease the player's gravity. In extreme cases, the player will fly upwards until they reach the miniature moon. The floating rocks at ground level exist so that the player has some clear indication of the boundary where they will be affected. The moon is expanded beyond the zone affected by gravity because the player needs both something to block them from flying upwards indefinitely and a means of coming back down. There is a small shader to prevent the moons from appearing as flat circles. The rim and center are given different values, and we normalize everything in between. The anomaly is effectively a cylinder with the moon overhead having twice the radius. Physics is disabled for both the moon and the floating rocks, relying on the player's physics and collision layers. We also have a two-stage system for moon generation, with the visible mesh visible at all time and the collision sphere created when the player enters a certain range of the moon. In order to implement gravity, the static downward force used before was removed with a method call that samples the gravity at the player's current position. There are about 100 different gravity anomalies per world, so instead of looking up every anomaly every physics step, we store the chunks as vector 2i keys for a dictionary. We then look up by chunk and check for nearby chunks. This helps a ton with performance. Right now, only the player is affected by the changing gravity. The underlying system was designed to be shared though, so extending it to NPCs, monsters, and physics objects should mostly be connecting those systems to the same gravity sampling. Once that's finished, anomalies should become much more dynamic since everything in the world will react consistently. The world is finally starting to develop regions that feel genuinely different from one another instead of simply having different terrain. Next, I'm planning to keep improving the gravity system, continue polishing NPC behavior, and push further toward making exploration feel rewarding. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next devlog.